The flesh is weak, a term linked to the Iron Hands, who replace over time their fleshy parts with mech parts. What price does this dedication to ferrus manus have? What do they lose in the process? How heretical can they get? Have some ever become what the imperium fears, an abominable intelligence, i.e. all tech, with no flesh parts? The answer is yes, so come with me, let's explore this idea, and welcome friends to another 40k video. Let's begin. First, the cost. What if you're a Psyker from Wrath of Iron? A librarian looks at the cost in Barnex to his psychic brothers. Telak closed his eyes and leaned against the wall. The power generator on his back hampered his movements. He felt confined, feverish and claustrophobic. Nearly 2 days of fighting against a seemingly endless tide of corrupted mortals had taken its toll on his spirit, and his head throbbed within its psychic hood. Unlike his battle brothers who fought only with physical attributes, Telak drew on the powers of the warp, and the effort required to tap into that capricious well was significant. From somewhere far up ahead, he heard the heavy, repeated noises of combat. Nowhere in the hive was free of it. Most levels of the Primus spire were contested, and the crash of explosions and the drum of bolt of fire echoed down the long corridors and up air ducts. Every Iron Hands squad was active, spread out across the labyrinth interior. When he chose to, Telak could see them all in his mind, arranged like dots of starlight amid the huge backdrop of the hive spire. The younger warriors were the brighter, their light burned. The veterans of the chapter, those like Katia and Routh, only shone dimly in the dark, like the afterglow of a lumen after the power had been cut. He knew why that was. Perhaps only the chapter's librarians really understood the price the Iron Hands paid for their physical enhancement. What would happen, Telak wondered, if an Iron Hand ever achieved the perfection he craved? What would happen if, by some miracle of bioengineering, the very last fragments of organic matter were stripped from his metal skeleton? Would he register at all on Telak's map of souls, or would he slip into nothingness, lost in the background coldness of the material universe? Perhaps, if so, then would that not be something to mourn? No one could deny the power given to the chapter by its continual quest for augmetic self-improvement. The Iron Hands believed, perhaps even correctly, that no one force within the Imperium was as resolute as they were. More deadly warriors existed, they acknowledged, more violent, more flamboyant, faster and more devout, but none that possessed the capacity to endure as they did, to weather any storm with infinite stoicism, to keep going even when the enemies ranged against them had no limit. They took pride in that belief, all of them, from the rawest Medusa neophyte to the revered ancient in their dreadnought sarcophagi, carried that pride in their beating hearts, using it to drive them onwards to new feats of endurance, of devastation, of resistance. Pride, thought Telak, perhaps that is the last emotion to go when the final soul flicker has been extinguished. We have, after all, purged everything else. Up next is the first of two examples where they cross the line into tech heresy, in a short story A Sanctuary of Worms. A Tau on an Imperium station that's been abandoned finds the remains of a Death Watch kill team and an Iron Hands dreadnought whose organic parts have rotted away. A member of the Tau wardcast wakes it with a battery pack. "How did you survive?" He turned his optics on me, weighing me up like an iron god. Abruptly the visor covering the right side of his face slid aside. In place of flesh and bone, I saw a formless grey tangle, riddled with electronics and corroded rivets. "The flesh betrays," he said, though he had no lips, "but the machine is faithful." I saw his doom then. His body had succumbed to its wounds, but his depleted augmetics had endured, cradling his consciousness as life slipped away. Half corpse, half machine, he had stood frozen in this chamber for untold decades, burning with impotent rage as his dead flesh was consumed. Denied sleep or the deeper oblivion of death, he had watched as corruption blossomed within and without. I saw him descending into madness, then clawing his way back in the hope of redemption, then falling again. How often had that cycle repeated? And where did it stand now? And in Iron Soul by Phil Kelly, Jathlak, Leatherhand, kicked through a shattered bulkhead and cast about for signs of life. In the aftermath of a tyrannid, I mean when I say that, attack, finding a body he once to extract the Iron Hand's gene glands from the Dreadnought, who blocks access by disabling the sarcophagus clasp. The Wolf gets around this. The Iron Hand again tries to dissuade him, but he won't have it, and he gets in. He shielded his face to avoid the blast of energy and the subsequent burst of amniotic steam that would leave the Dreadnought's crippled pilot naked inside. Gritting his teeth, he pulled the trigger. The sarcophagus flew open with a deafening bang. Nothing came out but a blast of warm, stale air. Drathak sniffed once, nose and forehead wrinkled in confusion. His horror mounted as he turned back to the yawning sarcophagus that had swung open before him. The Dreadnought's interior contained a mass of wires, a few pitted bone cogs, and nothing else. What in the name of Russ? Expediency, said the Dreadnought, its vox tone flat. Abomination, shouted the Wolf Priest, his plasma pistol whipping round with the whine of recharging power cells. Suddenly the vault went pitch black. There was a whir, a crunch of ceramite, and then silence. So in both cases, they would be condemned by the Imperium. But there are also the Hellfathers, who would seem to be a version of undead Iron Hands that are accepted, though it's worth noting they never leave Medusa, and probably for very good reasons. And they may have been made by the Keys of Hell, forbidden tech from the Dark Age, hidden by their Primarch father, one of which gives cyber resurrection. Let's explore that in this final section. From Voice of Mars. But first, for understanding, the Hellfathers are Terminators who, as I said, never leave Medusa and act as bodyguards to Iron Hand commanders and carry no insignia or markings on them. Terminator cyborgs, you could say. And the excerpt is through the eyes of a librarian. The next passage gives you a nice sense of what the Hellfathers are. The Hellfather stood on the other side of the bench, as still as a 3-metre-high engraving of a Terminator's armoured ancient. The age-dulled plate was eerily silent, bereft of the usual sounds of power generation and life support that usually accompanied so heavily augmented a warrior. A human soul did not so much as flicker. He was dark to Lydric's mind. It was like looking at a wall. His lenses too were unlit, the same scuffed black as the helmet, but Lydric could feel the weight of something's attention on his brow. What he wanted to do was push himself as far from the Hellfather as he could make in one movement, but one did not rise to become prime librarian of Clan Borgus without supreme self-control. Lydric glanced up at the Hellfather. Do you ever wonder why they never talk? He murmured, as much to himself as to the Logai Legatus. Parpus looked over his shoulder. Perhaps they simply never talk to you. So let me know what you think to this video on the Iron Hands and the lore within, how they may cross that line into being heretical in the eyes of the larger Imperium due to their obsession. What do they gain and what does it cost them? And if you like this video on 40k, then why not try this one? And if you want a whole bunch of videos about the Dark Age, I've got a playlist for that too.